I'm excited to be here with all of you. I know it's evening for you. It's really a privilege for me to share this information with you. Although I have to say, I spent a lot of time. This is a presentation I've done for lots of different groups. I spent a lot of time thinking about how relevant I can make this for you. Because clearly, you know, when we talk about unrelenting uncertainty, which is the mode that I think that we're all living in now, it's very, I mean, you are experiencing this at another level. I hope that what I'm sharing with you, because it's from my own experience, it's from my client's experience, and all of the things that I talk about here are really science-based. So I'm hoping that it will be helpful to all of you. It'll be relevant, it'll be helpful, and it'll give you maybe a different perspective or just something you can walk away with that will help you to deal with all of the, you know, the many conditions and uncertainty that you all are dealing with, which I can't even, you know, begin to, you know, think about. So with that, so let's get started. And I wanted to just sort of quickly, so you've probably seen a bio for me, but this is who I am. I've been consulting with technology companies in the Bay Area for almost 20 years. After I was an executive in some large US-based companies and a couple of startups. I'll talk a little bit in here about how I became an endurance athlete late in life, and what I learned about leadership and about resilience and navigating uncertainty through that experience. My focus now, through the work I'm doing with my clients here, and mostly in California, is on helping them see what's possible. And I'm hoping that some of the techniques that we talk about today will be helpful to all of you, because you clearly are, you know, as I said, in a very different level of trying to understand where is the possibility, where is the positive thing to be able to see and pull from in your environment. So when I talk about why is this time different, and when I talk about this time, I mean I started working in this whole arena of navigating uncertainty and helping people see what's possible before COVID. So this is an area that I've been consulting in for quite a while, for like 3 or 4 years. And I think the environment that we're in today, when I say that this change that we're going through on a global basis is structural, it's broad, it impacts every single area of our life, it continues to shift. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before, but I believe that this structural change is going to continue. And what comes from that, which all of you know, is increased levels of stress and anxiety and personal threat. Now, I mean, I would say that 98% of us are not experiencing the same level of a stress and anxiety and personal threat as many of you. But I definitely saw through the pandemic, the increased levels of threat, anxiety around uncertainty, because our brains are not wired to like change and uncertainty. So when there's so much of it, it just becomes too much for us. And what happens is we end up with what I'll call cognitive overload. So our brains just get to a point where they just can't handle any more stress, any more anxiety, any more change, any more uncertainty. And even the smallest and basic functions and decisions become challenging for us. We have no personal resources, you know, cognitive or behavioral resources left to deal with even the most simple decisions and the most simple functions. Again, very different, I think. I mean, you're experiencing this at a different level, but, you know, this is something that I think, you know, almost everybody I know has experienced to some extent over the last 2 or 3 years. So through the pandemic, obviously we had big changes, you know, people began to work remotely, you know, work in very different ways. And there was this really blending, and I'm not sure how much blending, but this real integration of work and personal life where, you know, there was just no longer any delineation between, well, here's what I do for work and here's what I do personally. It all came together, and that created lots of stress and anxiety for everybody and many different ways of how we work. And we're still going through that now in terms of how people are, you know, getting back to work, whether they're going back into an office or they're still working remotely. Being at home meant that we were caring for others in a different way. So we may have had, like, our children weren't in school, or we had other people in our family, other members of our family that required care. So many of us, many women, ended up not only just working, but also being caregivers that they wouldn't normally be. With that comes a lot of, family dynamics when people are around all the time. And, so there was lots of stress and anxiety around how do we manage this different environment where we're all together, where we're all in the house together, in a very different way than people had been in the past. And of course, trying to stay safe and healthy. Now, in this case, I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about physical health because people weren't necessarily able to get care and go to the doctor. People put off, preventative care. And obviously, COVID was a big issue for all of us. So, when do we go out? When don't we go out? What are the things, the precautions we need to take? So some of this, I'm guessing, maybe applies to those of you who are listening today. But I'd be curious about, what is, and I don't know if, Daria, if this is in the chat or not, but I'd be curious about what you're finding, like, what are the things, the most pressing things that you're dealing with now? If any of this is, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. If any of this is in the chat, or people can share, if any of us, if you can share, Daria or Rena, if you can share any of what people are saying about, what are the most, obviously there's definitely safety, health and safety issues. What are the kinds of things that are are the top of mind and foremost for what you're dealing with now?
Our life is full of ambiguity right now.
Yeah.
For those who are in Ukraine, it's like absence of electricity. It's uncontrollable. You don't know when it will appear and disappear. So you can't basically plan neither work nor life. And you have this limited access to electricity when you in a rush trying to solve all the issues at once. Those who are outside Ukraine, they feel this kind of guilt and do their best to support those who are staying, but still also no majority of them have no pleasure of life, and it feels like all your senses are switched off and you can't enjoy your life at any aspect. So I think we don't have a challenge about caring about others, because maybe some have, because if you have elder relatives and elevators are not working because there is no electricity and you need to visit them and provide them with food and everything on foot. And family dynamics is also an issue because everybody is nervous and impatient and to stay safe. I don't know about health, nobody, maybe we take care more about safety. We go to shelters to protect ourselves, but I'm not sure if somebody is taking additional care about healthy eating habits right now, because
I'd be curious about, and we'll talk later about creating certainty, but how do you, we'll wait for that. I'd like people to be thinking, help thinking about and helping me understand, how do you create certainty and what normalcy, right, in your life when there's so much that's out of your control? Because that's where, as human beings, we know from brain science that we are wired to like structure and predictability and certainty. And when there's so much ambiguity and uncertainty, just trying to create little moments of certainty or little things of normalcy, that you'll get, there's a certain routine you'll always have in the morning, or you'll always do something with your children, or something that you can rely on. People don't need to respond now, but I'd like to know how, what they're doing to try and create, to the extent that you can, some normalcy in your day-to-day life.
Yes, training, fitness, sport, filter coffee. Let's proceed if you don't mind.
Okay.
Larissa answered that we do whatever we can to move towards our objectives, no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, you're certainly building, you have strong attention in building resilience, but again, it's at a level that most of us can't appreciate, when you don't even know when you're going to have electricity, or you're going to have internet, or whether you're going to be safe. So for those of us who are trying to live, get back to normal in terms of what we were doing 2 or 3 years ago, there's basic routines about when you get out of the house in the morning, or, what you do with your children. I mean, even then there's still uncertainty, but I think that we'll talk a little bit more about creating certainty and normalcy. I'm just curious about what some of you are doing. So I want to just share this quickly. I talked about how I became an endurance athlete late in life, and that was one way that I learned how to navigate uncertainty. So there's a long distance race. There's races all over the world. I don't think there is one in Ukraine, but there's lots of races in Europe called the Ironman race. And the Ironman is a long distance triathlon. So a triathlon, if you're not familiar, in terms of an athletic event, you swim first, and then you bicycle, and then you run at the end. And it's for most people, like for me, it takes 14, 15 hours. It's considered to be one of the toughest athletic events. We train for a long time. When I train, I experience all kinds of ups and downs, and positive things happen in my training that, reflect progress, but there's also lots of setbacks and challenges and injuries. And so I learned a lot about dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty through my athletic endeavors, because as hard as you train, you think you're prepared, you've trained, you think you're ready, but just like in life, when you're racing, sometime during the day, the race will throw a challenge or a curveball your way. Something will happen that you don't expect to happen. And if you want to cross the finish line, you have to make a decision at that moment. How do I keep going? How do I adapt? What's the course of action that I can pick? What's my best next move to allow me to continue to participate and to continue in the race? So I've learned a lot about managing myself and navigating uncertainty through the racing that I've done. And so I bring that perspective to the coaching and the consulting that I do, because this is something I continue to do, but the environment changes so much that I like to relate my experience. This is actually, the photograph is actually at the beginning of the race. There's like 2,000 people in the water all swimming at the same time. So I mean, it's a very challenging environment, but that's one of the ways that I've learned to navigate through uncertainty. And then this is a model that I use in my work that I want to share with you. So it's called, I call it basically developing a level of readiness to deal with the challenges we're facing. So this term, VUCA, some of you may be familiar with this. So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So VUCA started as a term that was created by the U.S. military for the environment that they were fighting in Afghanistan, in the Middle East. So it's about 20 or 30 years old, I think now, because obviously that environment, just like the environment you're in today, was volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But it's now become more of a generally used management term to in all the management journals and in the consulting work, to reflect an environment that is challenging and that is changing and that's difficult and complex. The way we look at this in the work I do when I talk about VUCA, so I've changed this a bit. So I acknowledge that there's volatility and uncertainty in our environment, but I believe that you can develop a sense of readiness for that sort of environment if you are able to build capacity, which is what the C stands for. So to build strength and endurance and build capacity in yourself and others, and if you're able to achieve your goals through a possibilities mindset. So I look at this a little bit differently. I still use the term VUCA, but I've changed the last two letters. And this is the model that I use to help people become ready for environments of extreme change and uncertainty. Let me go back here. So I want to talk now about what is this idea of building capacity, and what is this idea of building a possibilities mindset? So capacity, and you may think of it as something else. I like to use this term though. So capacity building is a way for leaders to think intentionally about ways that they can develop options to help people get better, to help people build capacity, to help people get stronger, to help people build skills, to help people leverage their talents. And when I call it you know, I call it capacity building, and I say part of the definition is not to react and fix things, because when we are in a mode where we're anxious or we're stressed, we're under a high cognitive load, we're facing something new, we don't really have the confidence to know, how am I going to deal with this? Or there's so many things that we can't control. Our natural reaction is to default to what we've done in the past, because we don't, you know, we're afraid, you know, we're scared. It's that fight or flight reaction that takes place in our brain. And so our natural reaction is, well, I've done this in the past, this is what I'm going to do. So we default to what we've done in the past, which in some cases may work, but with all the change and uncertainty and the fact that our environment has changed so much, as I said in the beginning, that this is a broad structural change globally, definitely, you know, accelerated in the environment that you're in, that we're facing, that is not going to go away. And we're going to continue to face this kind of an environment. So we can't just default to what we've done in the past, but that's our natural reaction, is just to feel like, well, we need to demonstrate to the people around us, to our family, to the people that work for us, we need to demonstrate that we're in control, because that's how we become leaders. Whether it's of our own business or our teams, we become leaders because people look to us because we're action-oriented, because we're able to get things done, because people came to us because they thought that we had the answers. And in the environment that we're operating in today, no one has the answers. No one has all the answers. I mean, we all have some answers, and we need to rely on the things we've learned in the past to develop those answers. But, you know, in this environment, one of the shifts that leaders need to make is to realize it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't have the answers. I need to work this out with everybody. We need to bring everybody's viewpoint in. So capacity building begins with the awareness to be able to know when you're starting to default to what you've done in the past, that you're starting to react versus what you've done in the past, rather than pause for a minute and respond, which gives you time to develop options. So that's a very key part of how you build, not just capacity building, but how you become more resilient and how you deal with change and uncertainty. So I talked about, so in terms of building capacity and creating a possibilities mindset, there's what I believe there's 3 shifts that all leaders need to make. The first one I just referenced is from being on autopilot to being more aware, from, you know, evaluating something forever because you want it to be perfect, to the willingness to be able to like make guesses and make decisions based on what you know at the time, and moving more quickly to what's next, and moving from functional skill sets, which is what we've all been evaluated on and which we've been valued for, and where we've moved into our positions of authority, to something that's more vulnerability based and has more self-awareness. So let me talk a little about each of these. So you may have heard the word autopilot before. So it's used a lot to define what I described is when people just react. And again, that goes to where we are in a mode where we feel like we don't have the answers, or we lack the confidence to know what to do next. We feel like we don't have control of our situation. So when we're in autopilot mode, we just react because it's easier for us to just say, I'm just going to fall back to what I've done in the past and hope that solves the issue. But for the most part, it doesn't, because the things that we've done in the past don't always fit and aren't relevant to the issues we're dealing with now, just because our environment has changed so much. Sometimes they do, but the only way that you can develop options that create capacity in yourself and others, instead of reacting, is just to stop and think, excuse me, and to respond versus react. So if you can just, you know, in the moment, I know it's challenging to do this, if you can just give yourself pause and give yourself a few seconds to just think, to be aware of what's going on around you, to look at what the possibilities are, and to just think about what are the options that I could possibly take to solve this issue, instead of just automatically, you know, in this mindset that we're in, this reaction mindset, to default to autopilot. So this is what helps to give you the time to be able to develop options. The second shift is from what I call exhaustive evaluation to basically being more flexible and more agile to taking action. So many of us have been taught that, you know, we have to, like, when there's an issue in front of us, We have to gather all the data. We have to talk to so many people. I mean, we just, and you've been living this, all have been living this, where you just don't have the luxury of just sitting around and looking at all the information and like, until you're absolutely positive that it's the right thing to do. And neither do leaders in any of our organizations now, because it just takes too long. And by the time you make a decision, the data or the assumptions have changed, the environment's changed, the competitors have moved on. So leaders, I believe, need to get comfortable with making decisions with less than all the information they need. And now what less is, I mean, that's going to be different for every situation, but it's really being able to say, to rely on your instincts, to tap into other people's skills, and to be able to say, what's the best thing we can do here? And just, to you don't have to have a consensus, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be progress. So moving from that sort of, not paralysis, but from that position where you're like, oh my God, if I make a mistake, it's going to be a problem. I have to have all the information. I really need to evaluate that. I mean, as I said, you've all been living that. None of us can afford to do that anymore. We need to take a look at the information, talk to other people, use our instincts, and basically say, all right, this is what I think we should do next. Because every decision is a good one until it's not. So you make a decision, you move on, then at some point you make another decision or you make a change. I don't know any of my corporate clients I work with who are doing 3 and 5 year strategy planning anymore, because there's just too many unknowns. So they're just managing from quarter to quarter. They're managing a decision, and then when something comes up, then they change and they make another decision, which is why building resiliency and adaptability and capacity in the people that work with and for you is so important. And then the third shift I think that's important for us to make is to build a level of confidence in moving from functional skill sets to ones that are based more on self-awareness. So I referenced this before. Many of us grew up in the business or grew up in our roles because we had particular expertise in like finance or sales or some area. And because we had achievements and we continue to rise up in the organization, that's how we were recognized, and that's how we were rewarded. But those functional skill sets aren't going to continue to serve us as well as they did in the past. What leaders need to do now is to be able to be self-aware, to understand what their biases are, to be able to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't have the answer, I don't know. And it's okay to say, I don't have the answer and I don't know. And to be able to say to the people around you, I'm not sure how to proceed, but we all have skills and talents and expertise. Let's talk about this and let's figure out how we do this together. And that's a pretty scary thing, I think, for lots of leaders, because again, we've all risen to a point in our careers and our professional lives where people looked up to us because they believed that we knew how to guide them and lead them and that we had the answers. But we don't have the answers anymore, not all the answers. And so guiding and leading people now is more about creating the context for the decision-making or the environment, building capacity in people, helping them see what's possible, tapping into their skill sets and their talents. Because the problems that organizations are facing today are way too complex, and they're changing every day, way too complex for 1 or 2 people to try and solve. The only way we're going to solve those problems is to include the collective knowledge and talents of everyone. So those are the 3 shifts, I think. And I say leaders, I mean, this is if you're running a business or you're running an organization, or this could be your family. But building strategic awareness and not reacting, but responding and creating options. Not being afraid to make a decision without all the information, make the decision, move forward. And if you need to change, then you change. And being more comfortable saying, I don't have the answer, and being valued for that vulnerability and self-awareness versus the functional skill sets that we all grew up with. So Irina, is there anything in the chat, or do you need me to stop for a minute to answer any questions? Sorry, my
Well,
dog.
the comments are about thousands of people of Ukraine who are without water and electricity right now. Katerina tells that our life is like triathlon, but after cycling, we are flying to the moon and back. There is a community for Ironman in Ukraine, and many take part. That's it.
Okay. All right. So I talked about this VUCA model, I talked about capacity building, right? Which is helping people to tap into their skills and talents, and not to create the solution or answer, but to help them find the answer. And then the other part of VUCA is achieving what you want through a possibilities mindset. So what is a possibilities mindset? In my definition, a possibilities mindset is really using uncertainty, seeing uncertainty from a place of possibility, when I like to say as a gift, and not from a place of resignation. So when uncertainty comes up, our natural reaction is to say, I don't know what to do. I don't have any control. And I get that that's a part of where so many of you are living now. But if we always see uncertainty from a place of, I don't have control, or I'm defeated, or I'm resigned to things being, continuing to be terrible or unmanageable, then we're never going to be able to see what's possible. And the fact that all of you have survived, over the last almost year of what's gone on in Ukraine, and that you're here today, tells me that you all have an innate gift to be able to see what's possible. So really being able to sort of internalize that and realize, what does that look like? And then when things get back to more normal, how do you amplify that in your lives? How do you say, well, look what we accomplished during this time? I mean, when you don't have basic things like water and electricity, or you feel like you're, the stress and the anxiety around personal safety, those are life-changing, obviously, experiences. But I'm hoping that there's a way for you to reflect back on that at some point, and to look at how you approached uncertainty, and how you had a conversation, or you took actions to see, well, what can I control? What is possible here? So that's what I mean about a possibilities mindset. And it's very difficult, again, because our brains are wired to basically say, no, uncertainty, I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to hunker down, and I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to wait for things to change. And as you've seen, we can't wait for things to change. I mean, they might change for the positive, but they may also change to be not positive for us. And so how we use that perspective to be able to see, what can I do? What is possible is what I'm talking about here. And this is probably something that many of you are already practicing. I mean, this is a model that we use in our business when we talk about how do we respond to change and curveballs. So I call them curveballs, which just means, in sports terms, means like a surprise, comes from nowhere and you don't know how to react to it. So when something happens, when there's unexpected situations, we have an initial response. Sometimes that's the negative response, where we just react and we just hunker down, or we just say, I can't deal with this. I'm going to just let it go. Or I'm just going to see what happens. Over time, if you think about building capacity in others, if you think about not reacting, but taking time to respond and create options. And if you see in unexpected situations from a possibilities perspective, then you start to make adjustments. You start to build different ideas and options. You make a move, or you figure out, what is my move going to be? And then that creates capacity in you to do that again. And each time you have an unexpected situation, or you face a curveball, unexpected situation, you are able to react faster. Your response is quicker. Your decision-making improves. The options that you develop for yourself are multiplied. And so you're able to make more progress. This is a model that we use. I'm guessing that many of you have done this. This is something that you're doing every day. You're probably in a much more accelerated position, I would say, than probably most of us, because you have so many unexpected situations to respond to. But it's that initial response and the adjustments, and then the options you develop. It's that phase that helps you, to create momentum for you to make a move, to make a decision, to move forward and create progress. Here, what I wanted to share is, so I'm going to talk about some science-based practices to deal with uncertainty. So we know from positive psychology and from neuroscience, which is what I bring into my work, that when we see what's possible, well, instead of us seeing a negative situation and reacting or hunkering down or retreating or feeling defeated, if we can see what's possible, and we can be more positive, that activates a part of our brain that's responsible for executive functioning. And so it activates a part of our brain that helps us make decisions, that helps us to be inspired, that helps us to see what's possible. And it actually builds brain structure and cognition. So when you do that, you're actually like creating more brain cells and more capacity to be able to learn more and to even make better decisions. So let's talk about some of these. So these are all things that I use with my clients and things that are science-based to help, mini practices to help lead through uncertainty. And I mean, I'd be interested in where you're using any of these to be able to deal with the environment, the situation you're in. So the first one is a concept from positive psychology called strengths-based development. So in many cases, when we're looking at a situation or we're working with an individual, we focus on the things that they're not doing well. We focus on the deficits and the gaps. Here's your development areas. But positive psychology says that if you focus on people's strengths, doesn't mean that you ignore the things that they not do well or they should do less of. But if you focus on people's strengths and you say, this is what you are really good at. If you focus on their strengths, you actually can accelerate their development. And again, it goes back to the way our brains are wired. But, you know, strengths-based development helps people to accelerate their goals. And it also allows them to see the things that they do well and the things that they can then leverage and they can amplify in their personal and professional lives. Related to that is the practice of using positive emotions when you can. So things like love, hope, and gratitude, to the extent that you can arouse those, that you can say to somebody, I am hopeful, or you can say to somebody, I appreciate what you do, or I'm grateful for. When you use positive language and you arouse a positive emotion in yourself, that also activates the part of your brain that helps you see what's possible, that helps you be inspired. And there's a concept called positivity resonance, where if I say to Arena that I am appreciative, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and to share some ideas with all of you, that activates a part of my brain that's responsible for positivity and for seeing what's possible. And then the mirror neurons on her brain, do the same thing. So I mean, basically, when I arouse a positive emotion in myself through language, and I do it with somebody, the same action happens in that person. So it almost becomes contagious. I mean, and you can feel it and you can see it when you're with somebody if you do that. So I would really strongly encourage you to use those, to arouse those positive emotions, and related to that, to use what I call appreciative language. And just that phrase, when you say to somebody, what I appreciate about you is, again, has the same impact. You know, it builds brain cognition. It puts you in a positive thought process. You can say to people, what I appreciate about you is the following. And if you want to give them a particular message, you can say, and what I need from you is the following. So you start with the positive. This is what I appreciate about you. I would really like you to be able to do more of this, or this is what I need you to do. But starting with the appreciative part, again, helps to build capacity in all of us, and it also impacts the structure of your brain. We talked about a possibilities mindset. Again, that's just really stopping if you can. So building that discipline to stop and not react if you can, but to respond. And by giving yourself that small space, you're able to develop options that create possibilities as opposed to reacting and becoming defeated or retreating. I mean, this, I think, is probably the strongest skill that I like to see people develop. I'm sure that most of you probably have a highly developed level of this now because of everything you've been through. But if you can just stop, as I said, and get in touch with what's going on and what's happening, and instead of just getting angry or mad, and just saying, all right, well, how could I make the best of this situation? You know, that's one way to be able to say, what are the possibilities here? You know, and with many of my clients, I talked to them about when COVID started, like how much people didn't like uncertainty. And there was so much uncertainty. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be sick. I don't know if my family's going to be sick. I don't know how long I'll be working from home. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. And so when there's that much uncertainty, we're not wired, our brains are not wired to be able to handle that. And we end up, going into cognitive overload, and we don't know where to go, and we can't make like really simple decisions. So just creating a little bit of certainty wherever you can. It might just be a schedule, like every morning, an understanding that there's things that are going on that you don't have control over, but I'm going to make a point every morning to do X. I'm going to do this with my children, or we're going to have this routine for if we can, for in the morning, or we're going to have this routine at night, or we're going to do something in the middle of the day. Just little points of certainty throughout the day help to alleviate this anxiety that we're facing. And it also helps us to be able to feel like there are things we can count on. There are some things that we can control. My message, when I say carry your own weather, and again, I know that it might be more than challenging in the situation that you're in. But again, it goes back to when you choose to respond and not react, right, to what you've and what you've used in the past, you give yourself the time and the option to see what's possible. And then you can develop, this whole idea of being able to pause, develop a wider range of options. It allows you to create a certain amount of certainty, to create some certainty in your life. That's what I mean about carrying your own weather. And again, I understand that some of these are probably things you're doing innately now. Some of these are things that probably are like out of the question because of the nature of the environment that you're in. But we want to try and get to a point where we have the ability to control some of our environment, to create a little bit of certainty that will allow us to function, and to be able to build this ability to have this possibilities mindset in the face of what I call unrelenting uncertainty. So that's the last slide that I have. So was it Natalia? Did you have a question?
Yes. Maybe could advise some techniques based on the fear of fear. I would make an example. For example, I'm not afraid of what will be happening in Kyiv. I just moved from Austria, being like for 8 months here, and I'm more happier in Kyiv, and I'm not afraid what will be in like 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. But when I'm thinking in big perspective, like because I want to switch my job and switch my career path, I'm like super afraid, like, oh my God, I will go now to the industry and the crisis will go, and the World War III will go, and the China would enter the war, and I need, for example, to look for a job in super stable sectors like railway station. So is there some special techniques when people are afraid of uncertainty on a big level than on the basic ones?
I think that like the larger levels you're talking about, like at the macro level, like what's going to happen, is there going to be a war? What's going to happen in the world? We can't plan for those. We can just prepare. And it's really, you have no control over those. I mean, you have control over what your own attitude, you have control over what you say and what you do and how you show up for your family every day and the work that you do. So I think that especially at the level that you're dealing with, I mean, I would focus on what are you doing every day to build capacity in yourself? What are you doing to create a possibilities mindset? Some of those practices I talked about, how can you build sort of the strength and resilience in your own small world, right? And I think that will translate, if you might decide you want to change careers, you might decide you want to move. Those are big work, professional and personal decisions that will benefit from you feeling confident that there are some things that you have control over, feeling confident that there are some points during your day when you're trying to create certainty, or there are some things that you can control, because those larger, global and macro environments, we have no control over those. But I think rather than worrying about that, focusing on you and your own environment every day and what you can manage and do within that will set you up, will prepare you to be able to make those bigger moves if you decide to do that later on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I just was making this switch 2 days before the war, and it ended that I lost the job.
Oh,
So,
no.
but yes, and now I'm afraid that I will make it again, and something happened and I lost it again. So, like, it should be the stable industry, not crypto.
Well, yeah, I
Some
mean, and that's,
fundamental.
and that's, I think what some people are, and that's actually a good point. With all you've experienced and been through, I don't think you want to put yourself in an environment where you're in an industry that has the potential to like be very volatile and to shift and change.
Yes.
You know, you might want to find something that's interesting to you, that's challenging, but that's in a more stable industry. I mean, it might not be the most exciting thing you ever do. I have clients who are actually doing that now, who are changing jobs, and they're going to, they're going to an organization where it's a good fit with their skills. It's not what they would choose if they were in a normal environment, but they're sort of at the point where my brain just can't take something that's really complex and difficult and that's shifting. I
Yes.
want to work on something that's more predictable.
So it's okay. Thanks. It helps a lot.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Bobbie. There was a suggestion about a book on the chat, Black Swan, by Nassim Taleb, on how to tackle uncertainty. And thank you for your contribution as a mentor and as an educator to our project. I believe that in a year we will be able also to deliver lectures on resilience.
You'll be able to what?
Able to deliver lectures on resilience.
I'm sure you would be able to do a lecture on resilience. I have get rid of this. Let me stop sharing. I have no doubt about that.
You know, in this situation we're currently in, no matter how optimistic and you are, how growth mindset you have, it still it feels as if all of your senses are switched off and you can't enjoy this life. Although you can find some micro routines, right, and you take care of your kids, of your mom, dad, and contribute to your community, but still, it doesn't feel that you have a real life. It's a kind of existence. Right. And this is what you can change no matter how smart and optimistic you are. Maybe it's my situation, but this is what I feel.
I totally understand. I mean, as I said, I can't even be, I mean, I can empathize. I just can't imagine what it's like. And so I pray for all of you. I admire, what you're doing. I admire that you're sticking with this and that you're supporting each other and that you're trying to build the mindset and skills to be able to move forward. I mean, I'd be happy, in the future, if it makes sense to do something different, or we can come back, and if there's a particular area and we can just, like, this was an overview, but if you have some experiences and things that you're doing, and now you're trying to move on to something more normal, what can we do? And we can make it more of a sort of a practical workshop or something. I'm happy to help you any way I can. I appreciate you allowing me to spend a little bit of time with you today. I hope there's something, like one thing maybe that you take away that you think, okay, that's something that I could do that might actually help. I hope so.
Thank you so much, Bobbie.